Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Open the Door. You got it, dude. Say goodbye to your dignity. I was working for an inconvenience store back in the day. This place wasn't in a necessarily rough neighborhood. I've worked much worse in the past, but there were just enough high school and college-aged kids to get real annoying real quick. This particular store has doors that lock with the push of a button behind the register. Pretty cool actually, an important detail for later. Also an important detail, my manager's a genius, so they have me put a big stack of beer right by the front register. You know, so the beer run guys can see how close the beer is to the door from outside. Curly-haired kid comes in after just walking around the parking lot for 20 minutes, and my spidey senses are tingling. I know this dude is going to beer run me, I just know it. He comes to my register and asks for a cigarette that happens to be very far up on the shelf. I've had this happen before. Someone asks for something that's hard to reach and when I turn my back they're gone. Not this time. I then press the door lock button, which makes a very loud clack at the location of the doors, which was my way of letting him know that I knew what he was doing. Well, he evidently didn't notice, despite my size, despite my exaggerated movement towards the button. I was thinking to myself, the best person to really think to, what does this kid think I'm doing? Maybe he was desperate, whatever, but as I turned around I hear a way more satisfying than anticipated thud. As this kid, with an 18-pack in hand, slams into the locked doors. This kid was on the floor. I have no idea how the 18-pack in his hand didn't break. He then kept slamming against the door with his body, saying, "Open this door, open this effing door right now." Enter malicious compliance. I see this kid come back towards one side of the store and wind up to plow through this door. I know this kid's gonna break the lock if he doesn't stop doing this. He makes one last long run at the door and then I press the unlock button last possible second. The kid flies, literally flies through the doors swinging open, tumbles to the ground outside, finally the 18-pack breaks, rolling everywhere. The kid picked up like 4 beers and just kept running. Next one is titled, Cancel Your Car Insurance and Screw Up Your Life? Sure. Former car insurance agent. Had someone screaming at me that if we didn't do what he wanted, then he wanted to cancel his policy. What he wanted was illegal, so it wasn't happening, no matter who he witched to. After he was repeatedly denied, he kept saying to cancel his policy. I told him he should really get new insurance first as my state has mandatory insurance requirements on active registration. But he said to cancel it anyway, right now. So I did. Well, a couple days later he calls back very upset because he couldn't find new insurance and now his driver's license is suspended. He has a court appearance and is suspended from his job. He was caught driving without valid insurance, so on top of the normal issues of no insurance on active registration. So he now has a very expensive ticket too. His job also required a valid license, so he couldn't work until everything was resolved. I warned him but he didn't listen, so sucks to be you, dude. I'm not commissioned. When I tell you something, try listening. I'm just trying to help you and advise you about the law. Next one is titled, Salute Officers, No Matter What. Former Canadian Forces was reminded of this while on our military stories, but I think it feels right here. I have tried to keep info generic so it works across other militaries. I've tried to anglicize some of the military jargon, but you all know how that crap becomes natural. On my first trades course, typically first course after basic, we were passed daily by an officer riding their bike. At that time, Canadian officers' rank was on their shoulder, NCMs had theirs on their upper arm. They wore a backpack that obscured their epaulets. Since it is a big training base, a lot of no rank privates live and work there. So we didn't salute. Instead of providing immediate correction, as all true leaders do, they ran to a senior officer, who told our course officer, who told our course warrant, who loaded up on belt-fed cock and unleashed. In all fairness to the infantry, I'm sure you've had worse cockings. Hell, I have too. But this was my first legitimate cocking. For the civilians, getting cocked is bad. Belt-fed cock is a reference to machine guns. It means powerful, repetitive, high rate of fire cock capable of creating a large beat-down area at ranges up to 1,800 meters. It's real bad. A quick aside for you non-military members of Reddit. The absolute worst way to get in crap, or receive cock, is if it comes from outside your immediate leadership. If my lieutenant caught me doing something, he'd say, "Sergeant, sort that man out." And my sergeant would yell at me, we'd have a good laugh and carry on. But, if a lieutenant from another unit has to go all the way up to their CO, to come across to my CO, direct lines of communication are frowned upon, so everyone is informed, up and down both sides, who then has to pass it down to me. Well, then I must be punished for the very personally and professionally embarrassing situation I put everyone in that chain through. See? Had the lieutenant just reamed us out to our faces, it would have all been over with. But no. We took our lumps, and vowed to never miss a salute on base again. The very next day, as we marched to class, there was the lieutenant on a bike, rank carefully placed so as to be on display, looking smug. Sad part is, they didn't think far enough ahead. When our course senior called us to attention and fired off that high five, the young lieutenant tried to return the salute, realized they were technically seated, so shouldn't salute, and tried to check their arms, place them alongside as if sitting at attention, whipped the bike off balance, and thundered into the pavement. We offered assistance. We're malicious, not evil. Shortly afterwards it came down from on high, like base commander high, that as cyclists were unable to salute, helmets were to be worn when cycling on base, out of headdress. There was to be no saluting of or by members on bikes. Next one is titled, "How about a free drink?" This happened a while ago, but I work at a pretty nice bar in the area. On the weekends we have live music. One day the live musician and I'm assuming his girlfriend show up. He's really cool and she's this really uppity witch. She sits at the bar throughout the whole night while he's playing his set. Drinking dirty martinis all night. Basically she told me when it was empty that I shouldn't hesitate to fill up the glass again. So every time I had to make another one I looked at her and she nodded her head for another one. He's all done with his set and she wants to pay for her bill. Her bill was only like $42 and she saw how many she had and almost immediately disputed her bill with me, saying she had only 2 drinks rather than 5. I calmly disagreed with her and eventually she said her boyfriend, the musician, will pay the rest. I put the rest on his tab and she paid for her 2 drinks. I think she tipped me a whole $1 at best, and then got up and walked out while her boyfriend was still packing up. About a half hour later she comes back in, hammered, and sits down at the bar and apologized for being rude to me earlier. I was pretty busy at this point so I just said, okay. She says that she brought a lot of people up to the bar a few weeks back and that I should thank her for bringing me some business, which I did with verbal gratitude. Then she finally asks for a free drink. Finally lets me know what she's really after. So I said we don't serve free drinks here. She gets a little upset and almost pleads for a free drink because she brought all of her friends to the bar a few weeks prior. So I stop what I'm doing and say, "You like vodka, right?" Her eyes get all big and bright and she nods. And I walk over to the drink well and put ice in a cup and put her drink in and hand it to her and she takes one sip and screams at me, "This tastes like fucking water." To which I calmly reply, "Yeah, that's the only free drink we offer." As a follow-up to this she actually did find my boss and told him about what I did and his response in front of her was calling me over, laughing, and fist-bumping me. Next one is titled, "Lunch Presentations." I practiced law for a number of years at the same firm. The firm had this policy where all the attorneys, partners down to the junior associates would have lunch together on Fridays and there would be a presentation of the cases that had been recently decided in the area of law that we practiced. Prior to my arrival, only the junior associates and not the partners gave this presentation, but that had changed so that both a partner and an associate would now give the presentation. There were enough attorneys in the firm that your turn would come up once a year, and it was a fair amount of work to put together the presentation for the Friday lunch. I got paired with a newly made partner for my very first presentation who was very disgruntled about having to do the presentation as he was now a partner and he thought he shouldn't have to do them anymore. He decided not to prepare any of the cases and told me that I was to do that and he would be there to answer any questions that came up. Being junior, I didn't say anything but went ahead and prepared the cases and gave the presentation. After I had summarized the first case, one of the attorneys in the room asked a very detailed technical question about the case, to which I responded by turning to the partner and saying, "Gee, I don't know, perhaps the partner can answer that," which is what I did with all of the questions I was asked that day. Naturally, the partner had not read any of the cases, so he couldn't coherently answer any of the questions. He wasn't well liked by the other attorneys in the room, who quickly figured out that he had me do all the work for the presentation while he did nothing. So, they began asking more and more complex questions, to which I would turn to him for an answer. By the end of the lunch, he was beet red. Going forward, he did his share of the presentations in the future. Next one is titled, "Refuses to pay with a lower bill or card, then wait for me to change it for you." This is a story from when I was a manager at a coffee shop. We usually have little change in the register as most customers pay with credit cards. Especially in the morning, we will have very little change, safeguard to reduce the temptation of stealing it. In my country, we have the right to deny the use of larger bills if we cannot give change back, or if it will be a huge liability for the business to accept it, have no change left for the next customer. On to the story. I had a customer come in the early hours and order a small black coffee. He then proceeded to hand me the largest bill we have. I could see he had a ton of lower bills and his card as he was picking this bill from a pile of lower bills. He demanded that it was his right to pay with this bill. I told him in my best customer service voice that it would be impossible for me to accept the bill as I wouldn't have any change left in the register. He was adamant and stood his ground. For context, this is a usual technique used by some people in hopes that I will just say, "Screw it," and give them the coffee for free. This wasn't the first time this customer had done this either. I told him I would have to go to the exchange automat at the mall we were in and change it. He sounded annoyed, but accepted that. What he didn't know is that in the early hours almost every shop in the mall is at this automat to exchange their bills to have enough change for the day. I spent 20 minutes in a line before I got his change. This dude waited in total almost 30 minutes for a cup of joe because he decided to use his biggest bill and refused to pay otherwise. Next one is titled, "Company Won't Give Old Phone, Thanks for the New Phone." I worked in a small office, of a quite large company, doing administrative work for the sales team that is mostly on the road. Sales rep who all have company phones. Just when I started, they changed the phone of all the team from iPhones 4s to 5s. At the time, they offered the rep to keep their old phones for $20. Forward 2 to 3 years later, they announced that they would update again to iPhone 7, or something like that. So as I knew that in the previous update they had the option to keep the old phone, I asked my manager, who checked with head office, if I could buy one of the old phone. At the end, they said no. The reason they gave was something like, "It's not fair if we give old phones to some employee but we do not offer it to all other employee." Still, I think that by this logic, it is unfair that the sales rep and the sales managers can keep them, but okay. Finally we got the detail of the phones exchange, and this time, the rep have the option to keep the old phone for free or to give it back, so we can use as backup phones if one of the new break. So here started my Malicious Compliance Act. I'm helping the manager when the rep comes to change the phone, set up the new and factory reset the old. I casually started asking the rep if they are keeping their phone. I quickly found someone who said no. I replied, "So, you are keeping your phone?" And the person quickly understood and say, "Yes, I'll give it to you." A couple of weeks later, my manager noticed that I have a new phone. With a not super happy voice asked, "Did you take one of the phone the rep returned?" "No." "Who gave you their phone?" "I gave the name of the rep." Manager was not proud of me, but did not really care. just wanted me to follow the directives from head office and well, I did. Next one is titled, "Sure, I'll give you my employee discount." Up until recently I worked at an electronics store that had an employee discount based on profit margins. I worked in the computer section, where margins are either incredibly small or non-existent. This is why if you've ever been computer shopping, a salesperson will try as hard as they can to also sell you accessories and warranties, protection plans. Computers are not cheap, so occasionally I'd have customers that would try to get every discount they could on them. Haggling, no. Coupon codes, nope. Price matching, negative. Another, secret. Many places that offer price matching do so knowing some products will be impossible to match because they have models specific to that retail chain. Then there are those who will lean in and surreptitiously ask, "Hey, can I use your discount?" Sure. Absolutely, no problem. Anything for the customer. I'd hit the total and they'd be puzzled because the amount looks the same as before. Because we got nothing off on computers. Luckily most people understood and laughed when I explained, but I have had a manager called a couple times when someone legitimately thought they were about to get a hefty discount that I promised them. Last one is titled, "Teammates refused to do their part with the presentation, I showcased their incompetence." This happened about a year and a half ago, pre-pandemic. I'm a business student in university. We were offered elective subjects and I opted for psychology. Classes went on with no problem. At the end of the course, we were asked to form groups, pick a topic and make a presentation out of it. This was evaluated, about 40% of the grade. My group seemed like they were a bit lazy, but I brushed it off, took initiative, split the work evenly and I did my part. I shared my work with them to encourage them and politely reminded them to do their part. Instead they texted me, asking me to just search their assigned subtopic online and copy-paste it. The least they could have done is share some relevant content for me to include in the presentation. Instead they sent me the instructions to do their part of work, via text message and asked me to copy-paste it. I complied. I took screenshot of the conversation, copy-pasted the screenshot on the introduction slide. The day of presentation comes, there's about 80 to 90 students in the room and we were asked to present our project. I walked towards the stage with a smug smile on my face and started the presentation, since the group was too afraid to be the first ones to address the crowd, and lo and behold the first slide was me introducing the topic, with the screenshot showcasing incompetence of my good-for-nothing teammates. The look on their faces was priceless. The professor took note of the text messages and seemed to understand what was up. I finished my part of the presentation and then invited my teammates to proceed with the presentation. I guess you can figure how things went from this point. They learned their lesson quite well and I cleared the subject with a 4.05 edit. To be clear, I asked my teammates nicely to do their part of the work twice and they just tried to rub it off on me. So I did what I had to do. I was being fair to them and they tried to screw me with their part of the work. Thanks for listening.